Thank you for joining us for another power-packed message from Dr. Myles Munroe, provided by Munroe Global Incorporated and MunroeGlobal.com. We transform followers into leaders and leaders into agents of change. We hope that this message is a blessing to you as you advance your life and discover your purpose. Now, let's go into the message.
I want to speak today on the subject of Kingdom Leadership Transforming Society, which is our theme, but our focus today will be on rediscovering the Kingdom Change Mandate. Please write that down. Rediscovering the Kingdom Change Mandate. And I want to zero in on understanding the transformation assignment. Transformation assignment. This is the most important series I have done perhaps in my life regarding application of the kingdom mandate to contemporary life. This is a challenging series for me because it demands practical work. It demands engaging society. And most of the time, those who deal with spiritual issues seem to be more focused with otherworldly activity than with the practical contemporary lifestyle. And so this has been a very engaging experience for me so far. I have completed the entire series for the year coming. I completed it already. I know what I have to cover. And the instructions are very simple to me. Kingdom leadership must transform society now. If it doesn't, we're going to be victims of other people's transformation. So I want to remind us of what this series is about. Our greatest challenge in our lifetime is the times we are living in. And I'm not sure whether all of us are aware of the times we're living in. Today, we are caught in a tide of convergence. Can you write that word down, please? Convergence. Throughout history, you can study history. I'm talking about maybe 5,000, 6,000 years of history. And you will notice that history went along as usual until certain points in history where certain things begin to happen. Now, things are always happening in history. Matter of fact, history is a record of things happening. But there are certain points in history when certain things happen at the same time, which is not normal. That happening is called convergence. They call it historical convergence. If you study historical convergences, you will notice that during the convergences is when life on planet Earth changed permanently. We are entering one of those again. Convergence means that different forces that normally happen alone begin to happen at the same time. So the thing that we can expect to remain constant is change. Because convergence changes everything. I call it a tide of convergence. It's like currents in the ocean crashing and having friction against each other. I want you to write the word current down, please, because current is important. When my wife and I were in Brazil, we went on a special boat ride because our friends wanted us to see a convergence. In Brazil, there is a place where the Amazon River, which is the largest river in South America, running down through the mountains all through the countries in the Amazon forest, it hits the ocean. So you get fresh water, billions and billions of powerful forces of fresh water rushing down in the Amazon River, and it hits the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. So you have fresh water hitting salt water. You have mud hitting clear seawater. One of the things when we got there, I noticed before we got there was constant upheaval. The boat was rocking and unstable. You couldn't even throw an anchor down. It was, when the water hit the other water, you have two waters hitting each other. They're both water, but they're different water. And the boat would not remain steady. Matter of fact, we had to hold on because the convergence of the two forces created tides that didn't exist anywhere else in both bodies of water. Then second thing I saw was the color of the spot was different. The ocean was blue, the Amazon was kind of a brown or green, but where that was almost black, because the mud that was hitting the fresh water stirred up ocean leaves and all kinds of debris and this black water. So you have all this beautiful ocean and then this black water. And then when we got there, the guy said, this is the best place to fish, because you have the fresh water hitting the salt water. It stirs up algae from the ocean, so the fish from the Amazon and the fish from the salt water come there to eat. And then the guy says, now we got to keep our distance from the center of it, because if we were to take the boat in the middle of it, it would suck the boat down. It'll capsize. We would die. He said the current there is so strong, you got two currents hitting each other and they're swirling around and they form almost like a centrifuge that sucks things in. It's called a convergence. Historically, that's where we are right now. And the currents are the dangerous part. Everybody say current affairs. See, that's a serious thing. Say it slow. Current affairs. There are some affairs going on in your world that are strong currents. And those currents come to carry you with them. And the only thing that doesn't move in a convergence is rock. Now notice, if you get caught in the middle of the convergence, what happens to you? It sucks you in. Which means that if you even have an anchor, we had an anchor on the boat. The guy said the anchor can't help us, because the anchor needs rock. So having a safety vest doesn't protect you. Having an anchor doesn't protect you in a convergence. You need to find something that's not part of the convergence. You got to find a rock. No rock, you are carried by the tide. No rock, you are sucked in by the currents. And that's where we are. We got so many currents flowing at the same time right now that we are living in what I call the season of massive change. Can you write that down? This is not just your normal time to live. This is a difficult time to live. Some of you are feeling it. You turn the television on and you're confused about the news. Every news channel got so much confusion. You got rape of a woman on a bus in India. Then you get hostages being shot. Not bargained for anymore, they're killing them. And then you got people who strap bombs on their bodies and blow themselves up and kill 72 people. Then you got heads of state going to jail. You've got bishops who are being accused of sleeping with boys. You've got CEOs who are considered to be criminals. There's so much going on. It's a time, I want you to wake up, please, because wake up to what's going on, because you have to spend the rest of your life in this time. And we have three types of changes that we need to focus on in this series the next few months. The first one is personal change. The currents are hitting your personal life. The second change is corporate change. The systems that ran the world are changing. And then there is national change, where nations are going through convulsions. And that includes, of course, not just culture, but also politics and political systems. This is a reality. What do you do in the midst of this kind of convergence? 2013, I believe, is the beginning of a season of convergence. Everything will change. Change will be the greatest challenge of our time. The pace and the nature of change will be so quick that we won't be able to keep up with it. We're feeling that already. We will have to decide what changes we desire. I sat at my desk this week on more than one occasion, and I was listening to the news from different sources, and I heard myself say, this is a crazy world. I'm not sure what's going to happen here, but we have to stand up and decide what will happen. Otherwise, things will happen to us. And it's therefore important that we must decide the changes. We must know and understand and determine the changes that God wants. That's why God gave us to the world, His church. Now, the power of change is incredible. Let me deal with that very quickly. Nothing is permanent. We know that. And change is constant. We also know that everything changes, and change is inevitable. You can't stop it. Change is also the principle of life. Everything in life changes, we say. And change is the principle of creation. Everything around us is going through transition, including this meeting itself. The way this room was before you came in changed. But here's some things about change that is real. Your body will change. Say amen. Your relationships will change. Your friends will change. Your marriage will change. Your job will change. Your priorities will change. Even your values will change. We got to be careful with that one. Your knowledge base will change, and your interests will change. And then your children will change. Everything that affects your life will change, including your life itself. And there are four types of changes that I talked about, and I want to quickly remind you of them. There's change that we let happen. There's change that we watch happen. Then there's change that we ask what happened. And then there's change that we make happen. This is the one that we want to focus on. Now, I want to remind you something very dangerous. 2013 is the beginning of a season, I believe it's going to last more than 10 years, of major transformation. And this will be spiritual transformation. There'll be climatic transformation. There'll be environment changes. There'll also be cultural changes, and we got to work through all of them. We also will experience social structural changes, which I think we're feeling it now coming into the Bahamas. All of us who are sitting in this place and the millions who may be watching this program, you are going to go through in your country every one of those changes. Look at them carefully. There'll be spiritual change. That means people will challenge their spiritual values. There will be climatic changes. You will find snow in places where snow ain't supposed to be. I think a few weeks ago when I made that statement, someone called me and says it's snowing in Arizona. It never snowed in Arizona. At least not in the plains. Climate's going to change. We're going to have environmental changes. Not just physical environment, but also we're going to have environment in your work conditions, your labor relationships. Political environments will change. And of course, we will have social structural changes. There are 10 national changes I want you to remember. I'll write them down quickly. These are important. There'll be political change. I don't know if I'm a prophet or what, but I know I can read the times. Politics is going to change. It's already started. The politics that actually ran countries for years is going to be transformed. Secondly, there will be constitutional changes. People will tamper with long-standing traditions in constitutional power. There'll also be social change. And then number 4 is very dangerous. There'll be ideological changes which produces your philosophy of life. And this is dangerous. And I think most believers, sometimes we become so spooky, we become stupid. We must remember that people are constantly trying to tamper with our ideals. And ideology is important for you to settle on. What are my ideals? Because your ideology will determine your philosophy in life, which will determine the way you live and respond to life. There will also be moral changes. Morality is going to be under stress. There'll also be values changes, and these two are related. Whatever you value becomes your moral standard, which becomes your ethics. Religion will change. There'll be a lot of people going through religious transitions, even some dropping out of religion. Most of the young people in our country, for example, who are 14 years old, many of them never been to a church. I know you can't believe it, but you talk to Pastor Dave, our youth pastor, he'll tell you he's shocked at how many young people in the Bahamas never went to Sunday school. They grew up without being churched. Some of us in this room, we've been churched, so we think everybody's churched. And you may listen to Brother Corey this morning as he sang, and you couldn't understand his words, maybe you didn't like his music, but let me tell you something, there are kids who don't sing Amazing Grace. They never heard it. And someone got to talk to those kids in their language. There'll also be religious changes and then scientific changes. And scientific change is very dangerous, not just in the medical and pharmaceutical field, but also we heard recently that the new president of North Korea have threatened the United States with nuclear threat. Now that may sound simple to you, but we can't afford a war right now. And somehow there seemed to be some pressure on him as a young man. He's not even 30 years old. He runs a country. And then it seemed like there's pressure on him by the older people around him to prove himself. And when a person is pressured to prove themselves, they do irrational things. In other words, don't sit there wondering if the guy wouldn't press the button. And I'm going to tell you now, if his threat becomes more intense this week, there's going to be some response. You ain't seen life change for you yet. You think we got an economic problem. All we need now is a war. So there will be scientific changes where people who never had nuclear weapons will have them. The president of Iran, as you know, has been fighting toward gaining control over nuclear power. Don't sit there and just say hallelujah. This is dangerous stuff. We have to know what's going on and know how we're supposed to respond. Who knows if going to China will eventually lead me to North Korea and I can somehow meet with the right people and get them saved. We don't know that. To avert war. Can God be that deep? I got that kind of faith. There's going to be also technological changes. You got your iPad in your hand now, you're proving it. But the last one is the one I want you to write in capital letters. There will also be definition changes. And this is a dangerous one. Definition changes. We live in a time where what was bread ain't bread no more. They are changing definitions. In other words, we never ever in our lifetime discuss what marriage is. We never talked about it. No civilization that I have ever studied in history in my short lifetime ever debated a definition of marriage. None. The Romans, the Greeks, the Byzantine, none of them ever debated. We're the only generation I know who's sitting down redefining some things. For example, we call killing your baby now abortion. It's actually murder because it's a human life, but we use nice words. We now call homosexuality nice things like alternative lifestyle. We use terms like preference, sexual preference, not deviant, sexual preference. Deviant means you deviate from the natural norm. But we don't want to call ourselves a deviant, so we say we are preferentially choosing something. We're redefining things. If a man is a man, but he wants to be like a woman, we have a new definition. We call him cross-dresser or she-male. There's no definition anywhere in the world for that statement. I don't know. It doesn't exist. I've never seen a she who's a male. This doesn't make sense. But they are reinventing definitions. And this is important because they are using definitions to play with your mind to give you a lack of conscience of conviction. You can't have a conviction if I change the definition. For example, we call thieving white-collar crime. It's thieving. People who cook the books, we say they misappropriated funds. No, man, you lied and you stole. But we use new definitions. He's not a real criminal, you know. He's just misguided from his youth. It's amazing how we have come into a time when nothing has any clear definition anymore. You can kill a man and they can call it something else. They can say, temperate lack of control, psychological imbalance. You're a murderer, man. No, you are psychologically imbalanced at the moment, they say. And then they say, now, maybe something went wrong with you when you were 3. You wet your bed. Listen, man, you're a killer. But the way we redefine, are you getting me? See, don't just sit there. When they hit you, you better be aware of what they're hitting you with in this culture of the world. They call economic invasion, they call it shuttle diplomacy. They call it International Monetary Fund. It's economic invasion. Listen, don't get mad at me. This is the way it is. And we need to realize they are redefining some things. I remember when babies came out of mother's womb, the doctor would spank the baby. Bam. Now they say that's child abuse. Oh, I read it. I was reading it in the magazine. I said, wait a minute. How many babies were spanked throughout history? It's now child abuse. The doctor can't spank it anymore. Oh, you better wake up. And now when you punish your child in the act of discipline, it is called parental abuse. The definitions. My mother used to say, I gonna whale you. If you use that term today, They would say, you are violent. They got states in the world where a child can take a parent to court for punishing them. I hope you are awake. Definitions are changing. And throughout this series, we're going to talk about some of these definitions because they're confusing the definitions. This is the big fight right now, which we'll get into in more detail later. But it's the big fight now that's going on with the marital definition. People are, the fight is who defines marriage? Do we let a small group of 10% define marriage for us? Or do we stand up and say, no, find something else to call that, but that ain't marriage? What's the definition? And these are the challenges we have that we're facing. So we live in an age of change, and I want to give you some of the terms that they're using. I want you to write them down because you must be intelligent enough to interpret when you hear these statements what they mean. I call it the age of change definitions. Some experts are calling the age words like the new normal. You heard that? Is there such a thing as the new normal? First you got normal things, like a woman is a normal female. Then they got a new normal now where a woman could be half, whatever that means. So you got, she's normal, but she's a new normal. That's the term they're using, a new normal. Two men living together in a covenant is called a normal, but it's called a new normal. So they got a sitcom on television now, it's called The Modern Family. You got to listen to those things. Your kids are watching that. The Modern Family is two men with children on your TV in your house right now. They call it the new normal. What is the new normal? See, they're playing with words. They're saying it's normal for two lesbians to get married. It's normal. It's just that you got the old normal. We got the new normal, they say. This is the new normal. This is no. How can this be normal? We got to define normal then. And if normal is defined by nature, then that cannot be a new normal. In other words, what is normal? Can you democratically vote and create normal? Yes, they're doing it. They're saying if enough people vote for it, they make it normal. How can you make something normal when it is abnormal? What is abnormal? Abnormal, it means it's against the norm. What is normal? Another term they use today is the postmodern age. You ever heard that? The postmodern age means you all thought y'all was modern, but we post y'all now. Y'all thought y'all advanced. We advanced beyond the advanced now. We are more sophisticated than the sophisticated. What kind of terms these people are using? In other words, the Apostle Paul covered it in one statement in Romans chapter 1. Paul says they invent new ways to sin. Can I quote it again? It's in the book of Romans chapter 1. He said they invent new ways to sin. In other words, the same old sin, but they find new ways to do it. So there ain't nothing new under the sun. It's just repackaged. And you're living in a time where they are coming up with statements so fast that they're making you believe them. How about this one? They say there's also the age of secularized society. Secularization of society. Secularization means that they want to get rid of anything that is spiritual or religious out of society. That is called secularization. Secularism is vanquishing any trace of religious, moral, spiritual influence out of a society. And that is happening right now in the Bahamas. I think next week I'm going to play for you something that was said by one of our MPs in Parliament. I'm not going to start, I'm just going to play it. I ain't going to say it no more. I want you to hear what was said about secularizing the Bahamas in our Parliament. That means get rid of God. That's why they are fussing with the preamble. The preamble is a problem, because the preamble states that we will respect Christian values. Christian refers to spirituality, which is a problem to the secular mind. The secular is saying, I don't want nothing to prick my conscience. Leave my conscience alone. Let me decide what is acceptable or unacceptable, what is right or what is wrong. Let me decide that. Forget this thing you all call God. I am the end in myself. A secularization. Another term they use, write it down, is, this one is dangerous, the enlightened society. Oh, this is a big one. This is a big one recently. You know, they say, well, you are not enlightened. I heard someone use it on a radio talk show one day, you know, one homosexual called it and says, you know, some of these pastors are not enlightened, they said. They're not enlightened. What they're saying is, your thinking is old-fashioned. This is a dangerous statement. The enlightened society means that we are liberal to the point where we have no boundaries. The enlightened society says we are the law. The enlightened society says we can change them when we want. That's the laws. Enlightened society is we are so sophisticated now that we are capable of accepting anything that we can justify personally, even though it may not be naturally acceptable. If we can accept it ourselves, then it is acceptable. No boundaries. That's the society that we are converging with. That is the mentality that we are working with. And I beg you as an individual to wake up, please, and think about this, because when you go to your job this week, there are people working next to you who think like that. They say things like, you still believe in that old stupid book, the Bible? That's written by men. That's old, that's archaic, that's out of date, that's not an enlightened book. That book is so old-fashioned. It doesn't keep up with the times, and they make you start doubting your own convictions. It's called the enlightened society. Every civilization that claimed it was enlightened self-destruct. Check history. Who do you think you are? You think you're smarter than the Romans, the Egyptians, the Greeks? They are all buried under dust today. You cannot outthink God. Listen, you will never convince me that you are smarter than God. Never. And the laws he laid down, you can't invent laws better than them. You can't even invent them. It's impossible to be enlightened beyond the light.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And God doesn't give light, you know. He is light. That means if you ain't got him, whatever you call light is actually darkness. And Paul says they call darkness light. And by the way, don't miss this next two sessions, because you're going to understand that light and darkness is what the fight is about. We are enlightened, they say. What do you mean two men can't get married? You are not enlightened. Someone has to challenge this. Why not us? Number 5 is the big one. The age of reason. They call it the age of reason because what they're saying is we can reason out everything. You don't need faith anymore. You can sit down and figure everything out, even if you got to invent the solution. Age of reasoning means that there's no need for belief in an unseen God. The age of reason means that there's no place for you to believe in something you cannot see. Age of reason means that if you can't touch it and feel it and smell it, it's not real. The age of reason, and the age of reason is as old as Pharaoh, but we think it's new. You know, they had some guys called the agnostics. And these guys got into all this deep stuff. You know, the Greeks are actually known as the age of reason. They're the ones who sat down and tried to reason out everything. I was listening to a debate yesterday on the Broadcasting Corporation of Britain. And they had a debate over immigration. It's a very important debate they had. And they were trying to deal with what do you do with people who are moving from country to country and they bring their culture with them? And they had two groups debating this. And what was interesting is that it was held in Greece, in Athens, where democracy was born. And Greece is now a basket case. That means they're broke. And most of their intelligent people are leaving their country because they can't find jobs. So there's a brain drain taking place in Greece now, and those people are moving into Europe because they are part of the European community. And what the other countries are saying is, don't come into our country. So now they got what they call fascism emerging, which is what Hitler was, and they're claiming nationalism, which is saying we don't want you all in our country because you're going to make us poor. So you got this tension going on in Europe right now, and believe me, it's going to happen in the Caribbean too. Matter of fact, we got some issues that we ain't admitting concerning the stress in our community right now, because we got groups that have been here for a long time and some coming and they are beginning to feel tension. And I was sitting there listening to this program, watching and listening to the speakers, and some of them were members of parliament, some of them were, you know, heads of great organizations, and they all ended the debate with no solution. And I sat there and I said, they're trying to reason out in the center of reasoning, Athens, problems that they cannot solve. How can we put our trust in the people who invented democracy and it didn't work for them? Maybe we need to question democracy. But think about democracy. Democracy as a reasoning component, if you think about it, it cannot work without God. Because democracy makes man God. Man decides what is acceptable by vote. Don't you ever believe, and I say this publicly, that the voice of the people is the voice of God. That is not scripturally sound. As a matter of fact, in many cases, God went with the minority. Joshua said to all the people, I place before you today life and death. He said, now I advise you to choose life, he said, but I can't make you choose it. He said, but as for me and my house, that was a private decision he had to make. As for me and my house, he says, we, I don't know about you all neighbors, we will serve the Lord. You will have to come to that point very soon. Because the converging tides are pushing on you. You are 48 years old, you ain't married. And a girl winks at you. And you are a girl. Oh yeah. I mean, what do you do with that convergence? It's vice versa too for men. What do you do? Can I say to you, friends, that we are in a period of life where you're going to have to find out where's the rock in all of this convergence. I got to find me a rock. I got to find something to put my anchor on, because this current is going to destroy me. It's going to suck me in if I don't have a rock. Jesus never called himself an anchor. He said, I am the rock. And upon this rock, that if I am the Christ, I'm going to build my people. My prayer is that we will leave this place thinking. I look at the Philippines. I cry for the Philippines. To see liberalism moving in there. I weep over America. Losing all the foundation rocks. Canada just about lost them all. And ain't none seem to be in England anymore. No more rock. You know what I discovered? They're coming to your country and moving your rocks. They're telling you, go with the tide. And when you tell them you got rock, they say, you are not moving with the times. And they tell you, you can't exist with us unless you get rid of your rock. I know the pressure. But let's remember this, okay? You are never remembered for what you compromised for. You are always remembered for what you stood for. Stand for something. The last one summarizes all of it. We are in the age of the humanistic society. Humanism is old. Let no one impress you with humanism. Humanism is as old as Pharaoh. The pharaohs believed that they were sons of the gods. Which means that they humans believed that they were gods. And that's why you could not defy a pharaoh. Some of you wondering why Moses had a problem with Pharaoh. Pharaoh was confused about Moses. When Moses came to Pharaoh, now Moses grew up with Pharaoh. He grew up in the courts. The guy knew their convictions, their belief system. He knew what their reasoning was. But Moses had to be taken out of the system for 40 years. And when he ran into God in the bush, the burning bush, God sent him back to tell Pharaoh, you ain't God. Pharaoh went into shock. What do you mean I ain't God? And Moses says, look, I suggest you submit to my suggestions and let the people go, because you're about to expose your ungodlikeness. And Pharaoh, like most politicians, decide, I don't care. This is what I was taught in the University of Egypt. I got a degree in philosophical convictions that I am God. And Pharaoh refused. And there are many today who are standing firm, refusing. Somehow they feel proud that they don't believe in God, as if they need a trophy. You are as old as Pharaoh, and he's dead. Humanism is when the buck stops with the human. When the human says, what is right is what I say is right. Which means that no man can judge no other man. Humanism. Humanism says, mind your own business. Humanism says, don't get in my business. Humanism says, leave me to my own convictions. You mind your own business. Don't try and convince me about anything. Humanism says, we are the end of ourselves. Let me tell you something. If you are God, I sure don't want to be worshiping you. You can't even get married. You can't even stay married. You can't even pay your bills. You ain't sure of your sexuality. How can you be God when you are confused about what you can see? Listen, these are just questions I'm asking. You got to deal with this when you go outside this door. Humanism. Jesus said there's a way that seems right unto a man, but the end of that way is death. Jesus said, John, I am the vine. You just the branches. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, you can ask anything you want in life, it shall be done. For without me, he says, you can do nothing. And then he says, only the fool have said in his heart, there's no God. You don't need to call people who are atheist fools. God did it himself. You can remind them of what he said, but they shouldn't take offense. You just repeating what someone else concluded about them. I can quote God, thou art a fool. That's simple. Don't get upset at me. But you see, the issue is this. Humanism is so dangerous because that's exactly what Lucifer fell over. Lucifer fell over self-worship.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The whole of his corruption was when he thought that he could be God. Who are we? I am so afraid to trust myself. I'm so glad I can trust in God. And those of you who think you are so smart and so intellectually advanced, be honest with me. At 2 o'clock in the morning before you go to bed, tell me what you think. You know what just you think on that bed. I know what you be thinking. You look at the ceiling and you go, oh boy, I hope I'm right. Because you know you can't be that sure. That's why you need to live by faith and not by sight. Because your brain is so finite that it cannot even calculate what happens when you lose your shoes. You can't find them. How could you trust yourself with your life? Humanism. This is why we have to be careful to define society first. And that's what I'm doing first. I'm trying to get you to understand the society we're working with. We're working with a weird society. And it's getting worse. And some of our people who went to college came back and they think they're smart now. They don't eat coconut no more. They think they got it all together. I remind them, you better get some juju and settle down. Your grandmother brought you up, paid your bills, put clothes on you, and she went to church. Now who do you think you are? You don't want to go worship God? Your grandmother used his faith to bless you? You better lift your hands and give God praise and repent, because this is the faith we have. Oh, hallelujah. I said, some of your grandmothers would turn in their grave to hear some of the things you're saying. Let me leave you with this thought. Write this down. We are witnessing change. That's what we're doing. And the change is very evident. For example, the collapse of governments. I'm talking about collapse of governments. Do you know that 2 weeks ago, an entire government resigned? Did you all, I was sitting there thinking, wait a minute. The whole government? Yes, the whole government said, we cannot solve the problem. So they resigned. Collapsing governments. And then we get the other problem of the rise of people power, where people are taking over governments, driving them out of their offices. And then we get this change called international and domestic terrorism. There used to be a time when the terrorist was imported. But now you ain't sure who's terrorist anymore. That's a change, eh? How do you fight an enemy who looks like you and lives in your community? What do? You better walk by faith and not by bomb. Another change is failed states, they call it, which means the economies have collapsed. That means global economic security has been wiped out of the equation. No one can predict anything. I promise you, it is incredible to hear governments say that the economic crisis is over. I don't know where they got that memo from. But it ain't over till God says it's over. And then we got the change of unemployment. Unemployment is a massive problem right now all over Europe, all over the Caribbean, United States, of course. You know, they see a little blimp coming, but then at the same time they saw a downturn in the other part of the market. There's unpredictability going on. And then we got the fall and disgrace of political leaders, civic leaders, religious leaders. We got people in top positions being disgraced. One of the cardinals who's supposed to be voting for a pope, you remember the story? They said that now they found out he was abusing little boys for years. I wonder how many of them are abusing little boys that ain't been found out yet. But don't take it too far. It's in your city. Who do you trust? Who do you trust? If you can't trust your pastor, your bishop, your pope, if you cannot trust the priest, the preacher, I mean, who do you trust? You wonder why the young people are so disillusioned. They don't know what to do. What do you do? You need a rock. Our moral compass is swinging and ain't stopping nowhere right now. We don't know what morality is anymore. The moral compass is just turning. You can't find north. Because everybody is adjusting themselves to what they want. And immorality is not just, physical and sexual things. It even could be issues like economic abuse of the poor. It could be injustice to those who go on trial, and a strong lawyer who gets money or who's a part of some fraternity, favors the person in the fraternity instead of the person who is poor. That's the moral compass being confused. You got issues with people who are employed, but the employer is abusing them. You got trafficking of women for sex. You got trafficking of children for sale. This is moral compass being confused. And we, as the body of Christ, as the kingdom of God, we must do something to make the voice of God loud. I am painting a picture for you because we got some answers. I'm telling you, we got some answers. We got traditional values being transferred. Traditional values, I'd like to probably use the term natural law values. Some things you just can't change. And then we got a collapse of sovereignty. Write this one down, please. It's a big one. Collapse of sovereignty means that independence today means nothing. Please, let's just be honest. When you say we celebrate independence, that's a formality. Are we really independent? Think about it. You need to borrow money for your economic programs, so the IMF says that we become your government. So you got to cut 10% of the jobs in government. You've got to cut back on your expenditure. You can't have no more capital development. You got to do this. In other words, you ain't sovereign no more. Then you got the United Nations saying, okay, if you want to have access to certain programs or certain resources, then you have to cooperate with the United Nations Charter. And the Charter says that you must accept same-sex marriage. And you must respect and honor homosexual behavior. And they say to do that, you can't, if you don't do it, you can't sign on to the Charter, which means the UN cannot then give you its privileges, which means that this is no longer sovereignty. You can't even claim your own convictions anymore. There is no national conviction in the system. What do? I am praying that the Lord will raise up someone from this church who would become prime minister. And may she be the kind of woman that will say, look, like Margaret Thatcher, we're going to do this anyhow. We're going to stand if the whole place goes against us. There's got to be some nation somewhere who says, look, we appreciate all that you all are wanting to do, but there's some things we cannot sell. sovereignty. We're going to talk about these in detail in this series because we are facing this right now. And it's happening so fast that some of us don't even know it's happening. The things that we have to agree with would make you sick just to get a handout. What's the result of this change? Let me give you this list. Distrust of leaders. People don't trust leaders anymore, right? That's what's happening. Secondly, liberalism. It's becoming a way of life. Liberalism means no laws, no boundaries, everything goes. The result of it is lawlessness. Where there's no standards and boundaries, there's no law. Lawlessness is the source of chaos and tyranny. Lawlessness produces, number 4, permissiveness. A young girl who's a virgin at age 25 is a freak. I mean, it's like, are you crazy? You still a virgin? I want to talk about a man. A male, a virgin at age 16? Are you crazy? Permissiveness. It's invaded the culture because we got rid of law. Why? Because we are liberal. Why? Because we don't trust authority. We don't want God to have our authority over in our lives anymore. We don't want no God to tell us what to do or what not to do. And so we become liberal. And that permissiveness leads to what? Compromise. And compromise is what automatically leads to immorality. Corruption is simply compromise manifested. It's when you sell your convictions and standards on the altar of personal gain. Corruption. Number 7 is my invention. Re-engineering morality. Re-engineering means that forget what God said. We're going to create our own. So we're going to create these different things to describe what we want. Not what is, but what we want. What is, God created. But what we want, we will re-engineer it. So we have sex change, for example. What's a sex change? And what's incredible to me is that these people get on shows like Maury, and they are so proud. And I'm sitting there thinking, I know you want to have some attention, but my God, there's got to be another way to get attention. Re-engineering morality. I'm a cross-dresser. Say what? I'm a cross-dresser. So which cross you are now? I mean, in re-engineering it, we can create something that didn't exist. Transgender, they call it, eh? Yeah. Trans. Gender. Trans means you're tripping. You go on a trip. Take transportation. This is, the question is, who engineered that? And that's where we're living. And by the way, it's in our high schools. Some of your parents have no idea what's going on in high schools. Come on, teachers, talk to me. The teachers here will tell you horror stories. Some of them call me, say, Pastor Myles, what happened today? What we found in the bathroom in a high school in the Bahamas would make you puke. Re-engineering morality. And you tell the teacher you can't punish them because it's child abuse. So the teacher got to permit it, permissiveness. Why? Because there's no law that gives you the protection to apply discipline. See the list? So you compromise with the kids. And you end up with immorality. And then you wonder why the community is decaying. This is the result of us becoming our own gods. Ladies and gentlemen, we have what I call the culture of death. I don't need to say much about this one. But you know where it begins? In the womb. Some weeks ago, I didn't misquote. I said 5 million. It's actually 500,000 babies are killed average every year in America. 500,000 babies. Now, let me tell you why that's important through abortion. It means then that if I grew up in a house with a mother and she have 5 of us, and I am aware that she killed the next 3, how am I going to feel about life? What value does that tell me about life? First of all, I consider myself lucky. Right? Because she didn't kill me. So it ain't a matter of she loved me. I was just lucky. Which means now that my sense of value and self-worth has just leaked out because she only kept me by luck, not by love. And when I fall into self-hatred, now I can't love nobody. So I don't mind killing someone else. After all, life ain't worth nothing. I learned that from my mother, remember? So coming out and shooting you for scratching my car is easy. You took my dope and didn't ask me. I will diss you. It's easy. Why? It's a culture of death. It's not just a decision. It's a culture now. It began under the system. There are abortions taking place in our country. No one wants to talk about it. There are doctors in our country who are guilty with blood on their hands. And someone got to tell them, you got to stop this. You got to face God for every life conceived. Because in the book of Psalm 139 it says, I saw you in your mother's womb and I knew you, God says. And every day of your life was written in a book before each one became. That's written in Psalm 139. I saw you in your mother's womb, God says. I had a book on your life already. And somebody snatched it. We call it inconvenience. God calls it murder. My father is here today. I still can't believe my daddy's something else. 11 children? Thank God my mother didn't say she died after she had 5. Because I am number 6. I mean, 5 gives a lot of kids today, you know. She could have said, you know, honey, that's it. No more. She'd have been killing a lot of stuff, eh? All them books that was inside of me would have been snuffed out in a second in a doctor's office somewhere, smothered by a nurse. The culture of death. And then we have the culture of violence. No comment. The devaluation of human life. No comment. Generational disillusionment. Big one. The kids don't know what to believe. Some of the adults lost their faith. People are disillusioned. Here you are, been under a pastor all your life. All of a sudden the pastor gone to jail for something crazy. And you're like, what am I supposed to? So what are the pastors I could trust? So you become disillusioned about God. You wonder why people lose their faith? They're disillusioned. We have to bring the rock back. We got to bring God back into the equation. We got to embrace, we got to tell God, don't leave us. Please come back to the Bahamas. Please come back to Jamaica. God, please don't leave Filipinos. Please don't leave, Lord. Don't leave Haiti. Please, God. Because if he leaves us, we have no rock. And we're caught in this tide. And it sucks us in. And we self-destruct. My soul labors over this. Sexual and social confusion. People are confused about their sexuality. Confused. A young man said to me, you know, Pastor Myles, I didn't want to be a homosexual, you know. He said, but when I was 6 years old, me and my brother was laying in the bed and he touched me. And we were just playing, he says. And I found myself liking the play. And now I'm 40 years old. He says, I'm still trying to get rid of that play. I said, you wasn't born. He said, no, I wasn't born this way. I had an experience. Confused. That's the world we live in. That's the world we live in. Okay, let me close with Romans 12. Turn there, please. We're going to deal with this the rest of the year. This is the answer. Listen to it carefully. Romans chapter what? 12. Look at verse 1. It says, I beg you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your what? Body first as a living sacrifice. Now, why does Paul start with your body? You think he started with your spirit. Paul says that thing you live in, that's going to get you. If you look at all the sins we're fighting, they are manifested in the body. Whether it is materialism, whether it is sexuality, whether it is malice and competition and deceit, it shows up in the body. So Paul says, I beg you, present your body as what? He said, don't kill yourself. Keep yourself alive, but make yourself a living sacrifice. I want you to go home and fight your body today. Do you know what they used to do with the lamb? To put him on the altar, the sacrifice? They used to tie its legs, tie it up. And the lamb used to be moving, can't move. Do that to yourself. Use the conviction of God's word today and tie yourself up. And tell yourself, you can't do that no more. Cell phone, do things. You ain't doing that no more. Paul says, I beat my body under. How come the priest didn't do that? Paul says, I treat my body like a slave. I make it do what I want it to do. Paul says, all things are permissible for me, but not all things are edifying. I can do anything, he says, but I become a slave to nothing. Beat your body. Look at verse 2 though. Verse 2 says, and be not conformed. Everybody say conformed. Be not conformed to what? To this world. The New International Version says to the pattern of this world. Be not conformed to what? The pattern of this world. But be ye transformed by what? The renewing of the mind. I want you to go back. I'll put that list back up there, because this is tied to what I'm getting ready to close on. All right. God says, look, be ye transformed. How? By the renewing. Okay, everybody say be. Be ye. Now the New International Version says what? Do not be conformed. Do not means God ain't gonna do that for you. You have to decide, I am not going to conform. That's a soft hand, that's okay. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't just sit back and say, well, you know, everybody vote that way, so I'm going to vote that way. God says, no, 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 no. You say, I will not. Boy, that's tough. It's okay to rebel against unrighteousness. Say it, do not. Do not be what? Conform. Do not means that you have to make the decision. I will not do this. I will not accept this. I will not sign this. I cannot vote with you. Do not means I willfully decided I will not do something. It's coming to that. Do not be what? conform. Conform means to be fashioned, molded, shaped. He says, the world has a plan. If you are pliable, they'll shape you. What they do is they break you down. See, you come out very strong, This is my faith. They said, don't worry about that. We're going to work on that. And they start changing definitions. And they work on you. So we got a guy, for example, who was a pastor or a bishop, and he stood against certain things. And then in 3 weeks, the guy changed his story. And then in 1 month, he has a completely different story. And then 2 months later, he with other people. Why? They molded him. They worked on him. They softened him up with all kinds of sweet words. How about this one? Oh, you don't believe in same-sex marriage. Don't you believe that people have a right to love who they need to love? I love dogs and don't sleep with them. When it comes to marriage, I'm going to give you all some information that's going to blow your mind. But let me just give you a little preview. Do you know that marriage is not a result of love? I'm talking about definition now. Marriage was naturally designed by God to procreate. Right? How do I know that? Because 2 males can't procreate. And 2 females can't procreate. So marriage was naturally designed by nature to procreate. Which means that it is the different genders that define it. No one defines it. It defines itself. You all are slow. So you can't define it. Nature defines it. You can define something else, but you can't define marriage. It's not even defined by no preacher. It's defined by nature. But then they say to you, but you don't understand. You're supposed to love everybody and give people the right to love who they want to love. And they start working on you, man. They break you down. They work on you. They break you. And all of a sudden you begin to say, well, I guess if you can't fight them. See, and then that's what happens to the saints. So we got massive bishops in America who you listen to every Sunday who believe in that stuff now. I know them because I personally talk to them and I say, what are you doing? They break you down. Everybody say conform. He said, don't be conformed. Conform means that they gonna form you. Now, oh Lord, God gave me a statement the other night. I wrote it down. He said, whatever you don't transform will conform you. That's a Myles from original. Better write it down. You can steal that one. We'll say it again. Whatever you don't transform will conform you. You will eventually be conformed. They're going to break you down if you are not strong in your convictions. Listen, die for something, man. Die for something worth dying for. Be isolated, castigated for something. Let them fire you because of conviction, man. Don't bend, don't go along with the current. the temptation is so big. You tell people, look, you can do what you want to do, brother, but I'll never accept it. That's all. I can't accept that. Why? That goes against everything I know about nature and God. There's no nice way to thief. You steal the hotel things. You just use a thief. Don't tell me your family hurting and the hotel got plenty of money. You are a thief. And I can't agree with you, and I can report you. That goes for the unions, Unions, make sure you stand up for what is right all the time. Not for every complaint. Find out what is right. It's justice. Be not conform to what? The pattern of this world, the systems. But be ye what? Transform. And there it is. Be transformed. How? The world says remove your mind. We don't want you thinking. Stay out of our business. You ain't supposed to challenge our commentary. You ain't supposed to question our reasoning. You ain't supposed to engage us on no subject. Leave us alone. Go be your spiritual empty-mindedness. Remove your mind. Be ye transformed by the removing of your mind. God says no. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Everybody say renew. Write the word renew down. The word renew simply means go back to the original state of thinking. I rest my case. Go back to the original way of thinking. Not a new thinking. Go backward. Re means to go backward. Yes. Go archaic. Yes. Go backward. Hallelujah. Go backward. Jesus is Lord of my life.
Thank you once again for listening to this message, as we hope that it has been a blessing to you. Our goal is to show you new paths and opportunities so that you can discover your purpose. It is your love, support, and partnership that makes Munroe Global possible. Please visit us online at www.munroeglobal.com for more product, partnership, or to join us at one of our live events around the world.